Welcome to Q&A with, a show where I focus on the role behind the person to give you some insight into how to operate in their world. Hello, my name is Davo, and today we have
Tanoh, Paramedic.
Thank you for being here.
No problem, man.
When I think of paramedics, I think of like fast-paced, zooming through traffic, kicking down doors. How true is that?
I'll say some of that is right, but there are elements of what people think about the role which just on a day-to-day basis is just not the case at all. Yes, a lot of the time we can have moments where it is actually fast-paced, where you're having to do multiple things at different times and having to think about so many different things, all with the purpose of providing the best care for that particular person. But with the way of the ambulance service paramedic these days, or the ambulance paramedic, should I say, it is a lot different. It's not as fast-paced anymore. It can be, but ultimately you just never know what type of day you're gonna have. One day it will be that stereotypical, just feeling like it's action-packed, this, that, and the other. But on another day, it could be not necessarily the slowest day that you had, but the nature of the calls that you end up going to wouldn't be what the general public would typically think that you would go to.
So then, what would you say are or is the official duties of a paramedic?
So yeah, ultimately, my job is to arrive to the scene of wherever somebody's called 999, assess them, take good history, find out what's happened, find out what I think is wrong from a medical perspective, provide the right treatment to make sure that they don't get worse in relation to what they've called for, and take them to hospital. If that needs to be done under blue lights because they need to go in a time critical fashion because they're very unwell, we'll do that. If not, then we're able to just drive at sort of a normal pace whilst I still continue to observe, monitor, and provide the right treatment for them.
Okay, and so when you do reach a patient and you want to take them to the hospital, it's not necessarily the nearest hospital, it's what hospital best fits the issue at hand.
Correct. So, for example, a common one is when somebody's having a heart attack, which in essence means that one of the blood vessels that supply the heart with blood is blocked, which then causes the chest pain, looking pale, sweaty, all that kind of stuff. We're able to recognize that through assessments and doing ECGs and things like that. We then send that off to a specialist cardiothoracic center and be like, look, we've got this patient, they've got these symptoms, this is what the ECG looks like, we're on our way. That might not necessarily be the nearest hospital. The nearest hospital could actually be 2 miles away, but then the nearest cardiothoracic center could be 10 miles, 20 miles. But ultimately, we found out that this is the cause of why they feel the way they feel. That is going to be the best solution to make them feel better. So we just go straight there.
You mentioned ambulance service. So is the ambulance service or paramedics, is that part of the NHS? Or is that a separate function?
Yeah, so the ambulance service is something that is directly attached to the National Health Service. So in my full-time role, it is working for the ambulance service under the NHS. So I work specifically for an NHS ambulance service organization. We do have some other ambulance providers who are able to assist the NHS with providing paramedics, other ambulance staff, to be able to sort of help us with the load, because the amount of calls for help that we have just outweighs the amount of staff that we have.
Is that a charity function? Is that a private ambulance services?
So some of it could be charitable. So for example, you've got St. John Ambulance out there who are able to provide
Volunteers or paid staff to be able to assist with getting staff to go out on ambulances to be able to respond to 999 calls. Others are not charity-based. It could be that somebody set up their own ambulance company. They've managed to procure some ambulances, they managed to procure some staff, and for paramedics and other ambulance staff might decide, you know what, I'd rather work for that organization because it maybe provides a bit more flexibility than what working for an NHS trust does, but you're still I suppose, working under the umbrella of the NHS, because you're still going to the 999 calls, you're still taking people to hospital, you're still redirecting patients to alternative care pathways and all that kind of stuff. But it just means that maybe your uniform doesn't say NHS on it, but they're still out there, like,
all one
providing
family, basically. So the NHS places their employees in bands.
Yeah.
Are you able to explain what bands are, as well as let us know how paramedics fit into that overall band, or do you have your own band?
Yeah. So currently, paramedics, once they qualify, you are a newly qualified paramedic, and you come in at band 5, at the bottom of the pay scale of band 5. Now, as newly qualified paramedics, we have to do a consolidation framework period of up to 2 years. So that's where we make sure that you, as a newly qualified paramedic, you're still getting some mentorship hours with an experienced paramedic. We want to see that you're still, like, trying to learn, still trying to reflect on all your experiences as a new paramedic. Because, to be honest, like, you've now gone from one day where you're potentially a student to being a paramedic with all this responsibility on your shoulders, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
So it's important that you reflect on those experiences, you learn from those experiences, you learn about what you've done very well, what you could work on, what you can do better next time, developing your personal and professional development, and all of those things, and doing mentorship as well. So trying to get all the newly qualified paramedics at some point will need to do a mentorship course, so then they're able to then mentor other student paramedics. And then once that's done, you're then put up to band 6. And then that's pretty much where you would generally see ambulance paramedics sit at, anywhere between band 5 and band 6.
Okay, sticking to my second question, sticking with the 2-paired system.
Yeah.
How is that determined with who's paired with who? How does that work? And if you're paired with somebody, is it expected to be a sort of a lifelong, as much as you're into the career really process, or is that it's just a rotational shift-based thing?
So in an ideal sense, you would have a set shift pattern at one particular station with one particular colleague. So I'm quite lucky. I work at a certain station, I have a set shift pattern, and I've got one colleague that I work with. Shout out to my colleague Simon.
Shout out Simon.
But it unfortunately doesn't always work in that way. So a lot of our staff, you can class them as relief members of staff. So they unfortunately don't have a set shift pattern. They kind of sort of fill the gaps. So imagine if I was on annual leave, for example, and my colleague was still at work, then my slot would be filled with either another paramedic or another member of staff. So I kind of fill the gaps in that way. So if you're a relief member of staff, chances are you are working at different ambulance stations within your area, but different ambulance stations with different people. And for me, when I was a student, I did find that beneficial, because then you learn so many good things from so many different people. You also learn about things that they might do that you don't like, or that you think, nah, I think you carry on doing you, but I'm gonna do it differently when I get the chance to do it. So from a learning perspective, I personally found that very beneficial. It can be difficult for people, because having to, constantly work at different stations, constantly work with different people, it does get a bit difficult. Whereas with, I know who I'm working with, I know where I'm at, I know what my shifts are. From that side of things, it is definitely easier. But yeah, most of our staff, it's pretty much kind of random.
So wherever you go, really, it's wherever the call out is, really, it's just, we need you here, you're here.
Yeah.
So why the interest in being a paramedic for the ambulance service?
I had gone to like a careers event in East London, and there were so many different careers about at the time. And I was interested still quite in something really sciencey. So I talked to a Thames Water sort of technician, because that can be heavily involved around like microbiology and stuff like that. I spoke to an osteopath. I spoke to other sort of health and well-being type of professionals, but none of that was really interesting me. Funny enough, as I was walking out, a firefighter gave me a pamphlet saying, "Oh, yeah, you'd be great, join us." And it was like, funny enough, on the front of it, like I saw a black guy, and I thought, okay, like, but next to them was an ambulance service car. So I thought, I don't know nothing about them. Let me just go up to them, talk to them, and see what they do. And just everything that this woman was telling me, like, was just ticking all the boxes, like doing day shifts, doing night shifts, being able to help people, help different people. You know, you need to still have a science background. You need to have a human biology and a health background. You need to know about those things like anatomy, physiology, like a little bit of pharmacology. And I was thinking, this sounds like right up my street. Like, let me try and sort of proceed with that. So I went home and I said, Mum, like, I think this is what I'm interested in. And I remember looking into it from a university perspective. And at the time, you need to have like however many UCAS credits that you need. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, UCAS credits. Like, but you needed to have X amount of UCAS credits, but you also needed to have a driver's license at the time, which I didn't have. So I said to Mum, I was like, and because I was at the end of college at this point, and I was like, I want to try and take a year out, work, save up to get a driver's license, and then I'll go back to university because this is what I want to do. My mum, being sort of a typical like African mum, was like, absolutely not. You are not doing that. You are going to go to university. So I ended up going to university to carry on doing microbiology because I was still interested in science at that sort of cellular, really, really small level and stuff like that. But even where possible, if I could research about the role of the paramedic, then I would. And ironically, one of our modules was must have been about like careers and career development and all that kind of stuff. So even though I'm on this university degree, I decided to focus on the career of a paramedic. And somehow that ended up being my highest grade of any work that I did on that course. So I thought, that is definitely a sign. That is 100% a sign. But I'm going to continue and complete that course, the microbiology course, which I did. So I graduated with that, which is great. But then straight after that, I thought, okay, what do I need to do to try and get into the world of like the ambulance service and all that kind of stuff? So by then I had my driver's license, blah, 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 blah. I managed to start working for a company doing non-emergency ambulance work, which was like basically driving people to hospital for their appointments, or driving people to care homes, or driving people back home from care homes whilst they had respite care and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of got me in the door, but standing like right by the door, because I wasn't really doing anything like medical and stuff. But in terms of learning how to talk to many different types of patients, like it helped me big time on that front. And just knowing like the inner workings of like an ambulance, where things are, like using like things like a carry chair, how to put a patient on a stretcher properly, all of those little things. And then luckily an opportunity came up to be a student paramedic with an NHS organization. So I applied, I got it, and then just worked my way up through there. Way to describe it at the moment is like there's two ways of doing it. Either you go to university, you do all the university modules, you do your placements out with the ambulance service, where you actually get a real world experience of how to apply what you're learning in university, and then you get your degree. Or you do it directly through the ambulance service, where you come in, they train you to a certain level. You're then going out working either with a paramedic or an emergency medical technician, getting your experience that way. But you're also being paid to do it because you're there working on an ambulance and stuff. And then you fill it out with other modules and other competency assessments. And then at a certain point, you then get time to be abstracted to go to university to do the relevant modules that you need to do. And once that's all completed, you get your qualification and you can register under the health and care Professions Council as a paramedic.
You kind of touched on this in your original answer to my first question, but are you able to, I guess, give a summarization of your day-to-day when you clock in and clock out?
Yeah. So my typical day-to-day would be, we turn up on the ambulance station. Usually we'll take over from one of the night crews. We then sign on to the vehicle. We check the vehicle to make sure it's got all the equipment that we're going to need. So that's things like the medication/drugs that we carry, making sure that any equipment that we do observations on works, is all fit for purpose. Any equipment that we use to be able to save someone's life works. So for example, our defibrillator, making sure that we've got all the relevant adult and child airways that we need, making sure that we've got all the cannulation equipment to be able to provide the drugs, all the relevant extrication equipment. So anything that we need to use to be able to get somebody out of the position that they're in, for example, with their house, whether they're up some stairs or whether they're on the floor, all of those things to be able to actually get them from where they are into the ambulance, all that kind of stuff. Obviously making sure that the ambulance is mechanically sound and that we ain't got no flat tires on. And then, like the radio will go off. We'll get sent down a call from our dispatch team, and then we're off. We go, we do what we need to do. If we need to take them to hospital, cool, we'll do that. If we need to provide any care at the time or en route, we do that. If we take someone to hospital, so we take them to hospital, we would then hand them over in A&E with a triage nurse. We tell them what's happened, we tell them what we've done, tell them what our concerns are. Once they've been handed over, we then make sure the ambulance is basically like fit and ready. Yeah. And then we go again, we go on to the next one.
What about lunch? Do you have to have lunch in your ambulance, or do you go to a centre to have lunches?
So where I work, we are still very lucky that if we do get a break, they do allow us to actually go back to a ambulance station to be able to do that. Sometimes there are cases where the day is just so busy that just doesn't happen. You know, I've got colleagues who work for other ambulance trusts where they will not see their ambulance station until they land back, because it's just so busy. There's just no time for them to even be able to have a set break in that sense. But then I've also got colleagues where they're like, like we got time to have a tea break and we have our lunch break. So it's just so like, the experiences are just so different. But for me and the area that I work, we are lucky that if you're within your meal break window, you do get the opportunity to be able to go back to an ambulance station within the area to be able to have your break there. And then once that time is done, boom, the next job comes through and then you're off again.
But are you allowed to actually eat in the ambulance itself?
Like in the front,
of course,
yeah. And as long as you're you're keeping it clean and stuff, you're not setting up this tiny little barbecue in the middle and stuff. Yeah. But and it is so important that we are able to do that, because we're in so many different places. You just don't know where you can end up. So a lot of us do come prepared with our own food, our own snacks, make sure we've got enough water, and all of that kind of stuff. Because you need to, because you just never know where you're going to end up, how long you're going to be there, etc. So in the front of the ambulance, when it's just you and your colleague, we're able to do that.
Are you able to just go through, parts of your uniform and the equipment that you carry?
Yeah, of course, man. So typically, this is the one that everybody would know about. The typical green shirt with NHS on the side, say an NHS ambulance service, maybe ambulance on the back with the epaulet spaces, which will have our role on it. So mine will say the trust that I work for, and it will say paramedic. Okay. And as I said before, not everyone who wears this uniform is a paramedic, and that is such an important, or that's quite a big misconception that our society still has. Okay. We've got so many people who work in roles similar, but with slightly less responsibility, but still equally as important. And to be honest, not everyone who calls 999 needs a paramedic, which is why we have these roles. my colleague who works with me, he's an emergency medical technician, and he's very good at it. And there's a lot that he does know, and there's a lot of experience that he's carried to the point of which he's able to manage and take care of many different patient presentations, and just the ones that he's not able to because they're just that little bit more sick where they need a bit more of a medical intervention. That's where I come in. So yeah, that's the typical one. So we'd have the green shirt, the green combats with loads of different pockets for us to have loads of different things in. For me, I can't lie, the only things that I would probably carry are a couple of pens. We all need pens, of course. Yeah. I love my stethoscope. That's probably pretty much it.
How does your role interact with other healthcare professionals such as an ICU nurse or even other emergency services like police? So
a lot of it is just mainly just collaborative working. So from a hospital perspective, from a nurse perspective, it's mainly the A&E nurses that we would end up dealing with, because when we come into hospital, we hand over the information to the triage nurse, telling them what's happened, what we've done, and then they sort of take it from there. If we have a critically unwell patient where instead of going to triage, we end up going to the resuscitation part of A&E, again, we're handing over information to both them and the doctor, but like the resus nurses are fantastic. You'll see that like in one ear, they're listening to what you're saying whilst also managing the patient in ways that they need to, all at the same time. But in that sense, yes, like that's where the doctor element comes into it. But different hospitals have different sort of practices. So you can end up going to A&Es where you hand over directly to a doctor. But from my main experience, a lot of the time, when we go to A&Es, we're handing over to the triage nurses who are brilliant. They take the information and then they decide based on their knowledge and expertise what then needs to be done next. We don't really have that much interaction from other sort of types of nurses like ICU nurses, ward nurses, not really that often. Midwives, yes. Again, not as often as, well, it just depends on the experience, but my experience is not that often. But again, when I need them, they're a fantastic asset in terms of the information and the expertise that they can provide. With regards to like the police, again, it's just a more collaborative working type of thing. They can end up going to whatever incident that they go to. If they feel as though they need medical assistance, then they'll just radio that through, and that will trigger a response, and we'll come to support them, and vice versa. Like if we're ever in a situation where we feel as though we need a police presence, we just need to radio that through, and we've got their assistance. Same with the fire service. There could be times also where we're all running concurrently to the same incident if it sounds like it's something that needs all three. So, for example, a like multi-car RTC or multi-vehicle RTC, chances are it's probably going to need all three. So all three would most likely be running at the same time. And from the fire service perspective, again, they're fantastic at the sort of making the scene safe side of things, the assisting us with extrication, like being able to get a patient out of a certain area, a certain situation, for us to then be able to do what we need to do. Yeah.
In situations where there's multiple emergency services going to be present at the scene, were you guys made aware of that beforehand, or was it you find out when you arrived that fire services here or the police are here?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Sometimes when, depending on the type of incident, it's so hard to be able to get all the information like neatly all seamed together to be able to then tell us, okay, cool. By the time you get there, chances are police are there or police are en route, fire there or fire en route. Sometimes it works brilliantly where we're aware of who's going to be there, the type of incident, etc. Sometimes it might be that, as I say, either one service would potentially get there first and then realize they need the assistance of others. And there might be times where we're running on a call which sounds like we'd probably need them, and you think, all day long, like they should already be running, but that might not necessarily be the case. And that's fine, because that's where our experience, our knowledge, our training comes in to then think, actually, no, I could do with the support of the fire service, or I could do with the support of the police, and then we just radio that through.
Has there been cases where you needed more paramedics at the scene?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There might be incidences where you feel as though the nature of the clinical presentation is so bad that you think, do you know what? I either need the support of another paramedic, or it might be just that you need the support of extra colleagues. You might feel as though, as a paramedic, I do have the skills to kind of handle it, but I just need extra people who I can then go, I need you to do this for me, I need you to assist me with this. It might not necessarily mean that you need further or additional paramedic skills, but you just need the sort of the personnel power.
How do patients feel when you say that to them, where, look, we're not going to take you to the hospital, but take a taxi or an Uber, or to ask your family members to drive you there?
So it's definitely, the experience is definitely mixed. I think as we're professionals, so anytime we relay any sort of information, we have to do it in the most professional way possible. But again, because of the misconception that, well, I've called an ambulance, so I'm going to be going to hospital by ambulance. It can kind of come at a bit of a shock to people when you do say that. So some people take it really well. Some people are like, okay, that's fine, I'm happy with that. Some people are really, really worried, and think, well, no, I'm really scared to go on my own. I don't want to go on my own. And that can potentially make things a little bit difficult. Some people, and it's, in my experiences, it has been rare where they're like, no, it's either I go with you. I'm going with you. I'm not going at all or anything like that. That's been quite a rare experience for me, but for my colleagues, I know that has happened. So it just can be very mixed. But I feel how you say it, like telling them what you found, why you've come to that conclusion, and again, the tone and delivery of how you say things can dictate what their potential reaction can be. But you can't predict it, because everyone is different, and that's why I love that. That's why I still love this job, because like nothing is ever exactly the same, and it's never really going to be the same.
Roughly, and something I wanted to ask you earlier actually, but I had other questions. But roughly, how many hours do you work? What's your shift pattern?
So for me, on my shift pattern, it's a 12-hour shift. But you're never guaranteed to finish on time. Like, there's things that are put in place to try and help with that. But again, ultimately, this is the care business. Like, even if so let's imagine we're in the last sort of 30 minutes of our shift. The ambulance service could potentially try to protect you where possible and think, okay, you will only save you for only like a certain type of call out. But if that call out comes through and you're the nearest, you can't exactly say no, and that's understandable, because that's what we're here for. And sometimes it does get to that case where that happens, where you get a call out like right near the end of your shift, or things are getting really, really pressured in other areas. For example, A&Es are really, really stretched, really, really busy. So trying to offload your patient into a space in A&E can be very difficult, which means that you've still got your patient in the back of the ambulance past your finish time, and just trying to sort out ways of being able to continue the care for that patient and also offer us the opportunity to go home are all things that we still are trying to get better at and look to protect finish times and stuff like that. But the shift is 12 hours, but it tends to go on for longer than that.
So then what is the most common reason for you being called out?
So for me, and for the area that I work in, it's actually falls, elderly falls. And the demographic that we serve in the area that I work is mainly on the older scale. I'd say sort of 70 plus.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have 100% lost count on how many falls I've been out to.
Are you able to save everybody?
As in save everybody's lives?
Yeah.
Unfortunately not. No. And like, we just have to be realistic with that one. And I think it's so important that paramedics, student paramedics, ambulance staff in general sort of come to the realization that unfortunately you aren't going to be able to save everybody. And even the only thing you can do is to just do your very best. And doing your very best encompasses being able to do the right thing at the right time where possible, where, hopefully your mind and emotions even at the time allow you to do so, because these are very emotive situations for you. They're very emotive situations for your colleagues, the relatives, or even bystanders that are there, because as much as we see it more than them, they potentially don't see this at all. And it's also their family that we're dealing with. It's important for us to continue to try our best through being able to keep up to date with any sort of learning and like better practices to be able to do better next time, all of those types of things.
When unfortunate situations do happen, for instance, someone has died, or let's bring up a particular traumatic event for a paramedic to be at the scene, or whatever has happened. Is there a system in place to make sure that paramedic is okay? What is that?
So we're quite lucky that as part of like our occupational health sort of system, if we feel as though we've got members of staff who are affected by that type of thing, we can hopefully refer them to counselling. Even before that, the service that I work for has got a system where you have almost like peer-based, not counselling, but you're able to talk about not open up directly about the incident in question, but talk about how you felt before the incident, during the incident, after, to allow us to go, okay, what level of like risk is this person at, and where can we intervene, and when should we intervene, and how should we intervene? So we've got that set up, and I'm quite lucky to be part of that, where I'm what's known as a trim practitioner. And if any of my colleagues have been involved in something quite sensitive or emotive or traumatic, they're able to be referred to our wellbeing team, who can then go, we've got one of your colleagues, whether that's a paramedic or another sort of ambulance member of staff who's been involved in this type of incident, you're able to run through the process. And I'm like, absolutely. So we've got a couple of things in place. It can be better, and we've also got a lot of or a few charities about that assist with that,
like partners and
it probably could be better, but with all these things, it could be better.
So what does TRIM stand for?
So it stands for Trauma Risk Intervention Management.
Your answer may be controversial for some, but in your role as a paramedic, is it fair to say, or accurate to say, that you must give everyone at the scene fair treatment, regardless if they were the one who potentially caused a serious injury to somebody else?
I mean, the short answer to that is yes. Like, imagine, we're at the scene of something where you've got, more than one party who is injured, and it's potentially clear that maybe one party has caused the injury to the other. Like, where our job is the care side of it. So it's not up to us to be sort of judge, jury, executioner at that time and be like, nah, we can't be out here giving this person the treatment that they need and the treatment that they deserve just because of what may have happened prior. We're just there to do what we need to do, and that is to be able to preserve life. So it doesn't really matter who that's for. We just have to do what we need to do. I can even probably extend that or like take that to a side step to a degree. I think that it is really important and this is why like diversity, equality, inclusion, all that stuff is very important to what we do, because at the end of the day, if you're a paramedic or you're working for the ambulance service, it is your responsibility to care for everyone, irrespective of what they look like, irrespective of their differences to what you have, right? Especially people who don't necessarily look like them. It is important that the care that we provide is the best, and is the best for everyone.
How do I say this without being wild in this, considering what's going on outside of here as well? Do you feel underappreciated by the general public, or those who you feel should be in charge of the NHS system?
So from the public side of things, I don't feel me personally, I do not feel underappreciated. I feel as though our society understands how lucky they are to have a system in place that if you are unwell or if something has happened, that you can call a number and hopefully at some point a medical team will turn up to where you are, be able to provide you care, and then go from there. One thing that we also need to realize as an ambulance service and as paramedics and as ambulance staff is that when people are unwell, like the whole term emergency is pretty much subjective. To them, that's their emergency. To them, that like they called you or they called us because at this point it's the worst. It's the worst day of their lives. As much as we might not think that based on the training that we have, because the training that we have is training to make sure that we can preserve the life of those who are critically unwell. But to this person who's called 999 for whatever symptoms that they have, and we turn up and we find them to be conscious, we find them to be breathing, we find them to have vital signs which show that they're not like an emergency by our standards, that's still not necessarily going to change the fact that at the time of them calling us, they thought it was an emergency.
Going back to, I guess, to the COVID times, how did you feel about the whole clap for the NHS?
Man, I don't know, man. It was, again, you know, it was nice, but I think my issue with that is that this is probably, the pandemic was an experience that hopefully will never happen again in sort of our lifetimes, our children's lifetimes, and all this kind of stuff. It was the perfect opportunity for people to realize how important certain roles within healthcare are. Like, if everyone just stopped to actually think, like, all us during lockdown, I was at home, hopefully safe. I'd like to think that people were hopefully safe. You know, certain services, like certain key workers, were still out there working through it, sort of risking the livelihoods of themselves and their families to be able to care for me at home. Whilst I say at home, that service is still there. And be able to think, maybe I can think a bit deeper in terms of how I care for myself, how I choose to care for myself, and how I choose to access certain unscheduled care, because that's what we are. We're unscheduled care providers. We had a big opportunity there to probably learn a lot more and do better as a society in terms of how we care for ourselves, how we care for our families, how we care for others, and how we use certain services. But it doesn't really feel like that has happened. And I don't know whether it's because we are starting to move into a society where it's so easy for us to get things so quickly. Like we're basically in like an Amazon Prime generation. Like you order something, it's there the next day.
Yeah.
So if you're so used to being able to have that level of access, you're going to use the quickest form of access that you're going to get. But that's not necessarily to say that that is the correct one.
Oh, so it's a fair assessment. It's your experience. So then what would you say are the pros and cons of being a paramedic within the ambulance service?
So on the pros side of things, you know, you get to like go to work every day knowing that you have the potential to make a difference to so many people. There's so many opportunities to just naturally learn and develop. There's so many opportunities to be able to learn indirectly about other people's cultures, which then in turn makes you a better paramedic or a better care provider through the experiences that you have with the patients that you've seen that particular day. There's so many opportunities for you to reflect on who you are as an individual and how you can almost become a better individual based on the care that you provide. There's opportunities for you to branch out into like other slight avenues. So if we're talking like from an ambulance service perspective, like now there's opportunities for you to go into specialisms such as like urgent care, where you're going to the people who are unwell but not that unwell, as in not critically unwell and need hospital, they just need alternative care. There's opportunities for you to potentially go into things like critical care, where you're on like the helicopter, where yes, everyone's unwell, very, very, very unwell. Like most likely they will all be going to hospital kind of thing. So for me, they're the definite pros. A potential con as a paramedic is, I suppose, the emotional side of things. You never know how it could potentially affect you. Like all of us come into it knowing that yes, like it's potentially going to be difficult from an emotional perspective, but yeah, you just don't know how it's going to affect you until it actually happens. So, and that's just something that you can't predict.
The very last question then. What song would you like to include in our playlist?
Oh, I think because it's just a classic and it's related enough to the role that I do, I'm going to go for Oxide and Neutrino, Bound for the Reload.
As soon as you said it relates to what I do, I said, it's not easy. It's not. It's a good shout. It's a classic, like you said.
That, like, if I had to do my Spotify Unwrapped, like, especially when I should have done it when, like, Spotify should allow you to just be able to do it at certain points, in your life, like
monthly.
Because there was the times when I was working solo on the car and stuff. Yeah. Like that would probably be on repeat. Like when I'm okay, yes, that's going to be a bit of a drive.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
No, I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. Hello, my name's Tanoh. I'm a paramedic, and you've been watching Asani TV.
If you've enjoyed this video, please do comment, like, share, and subscribe.
Asani TV, it is a wrap.